The anniversary battles lost us more men and aircraft in a single day than the 8th Bomber Command had lost in our first 6 months of operations over Europe. We who carried the war 500 miles to the enemy's industrial heart knew better than anyone how expensive it was.
This Robert Mrazek talks about in this book, he talks about the issues, the personalities and the conflicts between Ira Eaker and General Arnold in Washington. And this is all around the context of the September 6, 1943 mission to Stuttgart, where they lost something like 40 or 45 bombers in one mission. And this was kind of a continuing, they'd had the bad Schweinfurt mission in August, and then they had Stuttgart and some other ones. And he talks about this whole conflict that Arnold wanted Ira Eaker to win the war by using bomber doctrine to weaken the morale of the German civilians so that they would bring pressure onto the German government to surrender, and it wasn't happening, and he couldn't understand how come Eaker wasn't using more of his aircraft. Well, when you look at the statistics on the number of aircraft that were lost and the number of aircraft that were damaged and the number of aircraft that were out for maintenance in between missions, Arnold was just flabbergasted at the fact that he wasn't using a great number of the aircraft available to him. On any given day, he only had half of his aircraft, whereas other air forces would have 70, 75, 80% of their aircraft. And he believed that Ira Eaker was being too soft. And so this is one of those things that that you got a conflict in the vision of how the air war was supposed to be conducted, and Robert Mrazek in this book does a wonderful job of explaining the dynamics. Now Arnold was a hard man, but the thing about it is that in June he'd been reading the loss reports, and he understood that they were going to need long-range fighters, and he ordered one of the supply generals back in the United States to come up with one for the winter, but he didn't want to sit back and take it easy, so that's why he was pushing Eaker so hard, and it was a very costly adventure to sit there and try and push through, and the losses, if anyone is, well, if Masters of the Air, they talk about the Muenster raid where the 100th Bomb Group lost 13, 11 out of 13 bombers or whatever it was. At Schweinfurt in October 14th, 4 days later, the 305th, they lost 13 out of 15 bombers in that mission. The casualties if your group was targeted by the Luftwaffe, you just had a very, very hard time of trying to make it through there without that escort fighters.
And yet,
so go ahead.
No, I just not having those tools, because you're talking about Arnold is making that kind of not a plea, but a directive to his supply side. In what month or year of the war is this?
He ordered in June of 1943. He ordered his supply guys to bring forth a long-range fighter within 6 months, and he understood that it was going to be necessary, but he wasn't willing to let his bombers have the benefit of that sort of long-range escort. He wanted his bombers to go in and continue bombing, and he couldn't understand why their losses were so high, even though he knew that they needed long-range fighters.
Sad.
So if you go to the next slide, this is an interrogation report. Anyone who's familiar with the way that missions were run in the air forces at that time is a crew would go out and they'd fly a mission, and then when they came back, they would take the crew and put them into an interrogation, where they would have an intelligence officer or whatever that would record the details that of what happened, where they dropped their bombs, what altitude they dropped their bombs, did they run into any flak, did they run into any fighter resistance and stuff. So if you look down about 60% past the page, just a little bit below the halfway mark. It says, what does it say? The number of enemy fighters that they ran across, and that the penciled notation there is 250 to 300 Focke-Wulf 190s and ME 109s. Well, this is from a formation that had 15 or 20 bombers. Like, that's what they were up against. So anyone who, if you've watched any of the Masters of the Air series with the computer generated graphics where they show these masses of fighters coming in, I think they did a pretty reasonable job. But like, to sit there and be out there, and the 91st Bomb Group on this particular mission, where they were in the front, they were leading the 1st Air Division going into Schweinfurt. Now, in Masters of the Air, it talks about the 100th Bomb Group, and they were going to Regensburg, so they carried on through to Africa. But this was the 91st, and you're out there at the pointy end of the spear, and you got this kind of enemy fighter activity coming at you, that it takes a very stout, brave-hearted man to be able to do that and still function.
Yeah, that's item number 6. That's just
yeah. So if you go to the next slide, this is a telegram that was sent to the 1st Bomb Division after the October 14th mission of 1943, where they went back to Schweinfurt again. And it turned out that the 91st Bomb Group led the force again. They weren't supposed to. It was supposed to be the 92nd, but the 92nd was with a different combat bomb wing, and they were missing one of their groups. So they directed the leader of the 1st Combat Bomb Wing, who was an officer in the 91st, and they were flying the lead group in that formation that day, to go ahead and take charge and lead the mission in. So the 91st at that time was in front of 2 air task forces, and they had a sum total of 7 B-17s right out in front. They started out with 14. One never got a chance to take off. They had 6 that aborted for various mechanical reasons, and now they're down to 7. And they went over the target, and this is a report that's filed by a B-17 of the 92nd Group that had got detached from its formation and flew in with the 91st over the target. And if you look down about the 4th line, it says estimated number of fighters seen 500. And this is what's being seen from a group of men in 7 bombers. Like holy smokes, that's, like I said, you have to be pretty stout-hearted to be able to endure something like that.
And then have to go again.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And again, yeah.
I mean, you got to do this 25 times. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that your odds are not real good.
In chapels all over England, most of the men turn to their ministers, rabbis, or priests. Our guns were going to be especially important today. At the briefing, they told us we'd have help from short-range fighters and 8th Air Support mediums. The fighters were supposed to take us about halfway. The mediums were to bomb diversionary targets. But for the worst part of the trip, we'd be on our own. We had lost 60 bombers and their crews.
What happened this 17th day of August, year 1943, was a testament to American men with modern weapons and a very old idea, fighting for freedom. On this day, high-altitude bombers engaged in their greatest and, from the point of view of loss, their most disastrous air battle to date. Nonetheless, the results justified the price we paid.